Ladies and gentlemen, if I can have your attention, please, we're going to go ahead and get started with our program while you are eating. Thank you for joining us here this morning for our 9th annual High Country Economic Kickoff Luncheon. For those of you I haven't had a chance to talk with yet or to meet yet, my name is David Jackson. I'm the president and CEO of the Boone Area Chamber of Commerce. On behalf of our organization, our partners at the Blowing Rock Chamber and the Watauga County Economic Development Commission, we welcome you to today's festivities, and really we welcome you to have the opportunity to see each other probably for the first time this year. So it's cold outside, nice and warm inside. Feel free to hang out here and conversate as long as you'd like to. You know, 9 years ago we hosted the first version, as Todd Rice pointed out earlier, the first version of the combined economic kickoff event with the Boone area and Blowing Rock Chambers. We did that up at App Ski Mountain in the Snow Cloud Room. There were 84 of you there. Today we're about 305. A few extras have come in since then. This event is designed to be obviously the kickoff to our economic year, but it's also meant to be the kickoff to the partnership year. So part of the aim of today is to let you all be around each other, have that opportunity to break bread, to think about ways that you can get connected and move forward into 2025. So thank you for taking the time to do just that, for prioritizing relationships and prioritizing what conversations like today can mean for our community. We have no greater and more consistent champion of this event than our title sponsor, Chuck Eiler and High Street Insurance and Financial Partners. Thank you, Chuck, for your continued support of this event. Our festivities today also made possible through the continued support of Appalachian Commercial Real Estate, Allen Wealth Management, DMJPS, CPAs and Advisors, Skyline National Bank. Also, all of these partners have been with us for multiple years, and we thank them for their commitment to this event as well. We'd also like to thank those of you that are corporate table sponsors out there. Got that reserved seating early as we sold this thing out earlier than we ever have. You all were among the early adopters. And those folks, the Appalachian Healthcare Foundation, Blowing Rock TDA, thank you, Tracy, Blue Ridge Realty and Investments, First National Bank, the Grandfather Mountain Stewardship Foundation, Mast General Store, Skyline Skybest, and Rich Lyon and his team at State Farm Insurance. Again, all of you helping our chambers put on events like this means more to us than you'll know, especially with the conditions that we've been through here lately. So thank you for that continued support. There is a chamber connection to our first speaker today, a glowing example of the notion that a stint on the chamber board of directors will lead you to new and inspired heights. It was those very traits that brought Dr. Norris to the Boone Area Chamber of Commerce Board of Directors about a decade ago that also came to the forefront when our community needed its campus and their leadership maybe more than ever before. Appalachian State University is a gold sponsor of today's event, and it is my pleasure to welcome today Interim Chancellor Dr. Heather Norris.
I think this is the part where I say thank you, David, for teaching me everything that I know. In all seriousness, it was a wonderful relationship, and we're glad to continue our relationship with Boone Chamber. I would like to take a moment to thank David and his team for the incredible work they have done for the area's Helene recovery efforts. You all provided a critical bridge for our community from the very beginning and continue to do so. So thank you all so much for that. On behalf of Appalachian State University, please know that we all appreciate you and all of the work you do for our community. I welcome you here today. You are always welcome on our campus, and it's our honor to provide the venue for your program today. Thank you to the Boone Area Chamber of Commerce, Blowing Rock Chamber of Commerce, and Watauga County Economic Development Commission for hosting today's luncheon. Robin, I met you a few minutes ago, and I know you're out there somewhere. Robin, welcome to your new role with the Blowing Rock Chamber and with our community. I look forward to working with you. Harry and Joe, I'm looking forward to hearing your insights today. As we continue to celebrate 125 years of expanding access to education, Appalachian State University is proud of a legacy of service to this region and to the state of North Carolina. As of December, App State has more than 152,000 alumni. 75% of them, including many in this room, live, work, and contribute to their communities within our state. We take seriously our role in contributing to the local, regional, and state economies, recognizing that the university contributes positively to the livelihoods of residents in the town of Boone, Watauga County, and beyond. We are committed to ensuring that the university continues to support and help sustain our community in meaningful and lasting ways. We appreciate the partnerships we have with the civic, business, and government leaders in this room, and for that we thank you. We are indeed stronger together. We cherish the many meaningful relationships and friendships. I think we just heard David talking about relationships. We cherish those many meaningful relationships and friendships we have forged throughout our history. These collaborations have contributed to economic development, from elevating the arts and support of cultural tourism, to building proud championship athletic programs that represent our region around the world, to developing and implementing innovative research that is having significant, meaningful impacts in our communities. The trying times we faced together last fall did offer opportunities for continued collaborations, partnerships, and friendships among the university, our towns, chambers, and communities across all levels of our organizations. Our community came together in such incredibly positive ways through one of the most significant natural disasters in the history of the region. There aren't enough words of thanks for our neighbors, emergency responders, frontline workers, community leaders, business owners, state and federal agencies, for their many selfless acts. Our community jumped in, got to work, and did what we needed to be done, epitomizing the meaning of Mountain Strong. The respect for our fellow community members, business and government leaders, and education partners remains steadfast, and it heartens us to know that we are all in it together when a challenge is before us. Again, welcome to your university. I am honored to join you, and I look forward to today's program and many more to come. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Chancellor. You know, it goes without saying, it's already come up a couple of times. Hurricane Helene is going to come up today. I think that we know that we're all still dealing with a current reality that this catastrophic community-changing event brings to us every day, and our response to those days will also become the seeds of a strong return, not only for us here in Watauga County and in the high country, but for all of Western North Carolina. With much complexity and these challenges that are difficult, we also want to take time to remind you of the humanity behind all of this. Not the endless forms that we all have to fill out, but the people, the courage, the creativity that has kept us going and will keep us growing in the years to come. Thanks to the generous support of UNC Health Appalachian and the creative talents of Real Boone Studios, we are excited to unveil to you today the first episode of a new docuseries that we have produced called Messages of Hope. This series is designed to shine a light on some of the people and the efforts that you may not have heard as much about, or maybe you just haven't gotten to yet. This monthly series begins today with a quick trip to Valley Cruces.
We knew the storm was bad, but we didn't know really how bad. And then Friday morning, the water, we had it pretty well under control until we didn't. And that's when the storm hit. And then we lost all connectivity with the world, just like I think everybody else did. Then the pump stopped, and then the water just rose to to a level that the building just couldn't take. So it was coming up the ramps in several different places, probably up to my shoulder in a few areas. And so all in all, once the water subsided, there was 20 classrooms and a gym that had been impacted, not to mention the water that probably went up underneath.
It was amazing. I mean, 66,000 square foot building, 46,000 square feet were flooded. And there was just mud and debris everywhere. You know, we walked through the building, classrooms that were in perfect condition the day before were just destroyed. It was truly unbelievable.
You know, you look at what are large places that can hold schools, and two of the very first ideas and things that came to our mind, which I think a lot of people thought about too, was the Valley Cruces Conference Center and Caldwell Community.
The thought process for inviting the school here was a no-brainer. It was clear that this was our calling, that we are neighbors, and that's what we're here to do. So I was waiting on the principal's call. And if she hadn't called me, I would have called her. The second and the fourth grade are currently in the schoolhouse that operated here from 1896 until 1942. So we feel like everybody's coming home.
And it's been wonderful to be in places, to have school. It's even more so wonderful to be in places where people want us.
I was surprised. And at that moment, I went home and I told my wife, I said, geez, the campus actually looks to be really good. And she said, well, they must need it for something.
The silver linings for having middle school students on a college campus, I think, are many. I'm actually so excited about that. We've joked that we kind of want to do a pilot with this group of middle schoolers and see what happens to them after high school, because they're on a college campus and they can see themselves here.
You know, my goal has always been, and the goal of Dr. Porch is to bring people to this campus. And this opportunity to bring middle school students to our campus, it epitomizes exactly what it is we've tried to do.
I would say the lesson is that if your people are okay, it's going to be okay. Just really helped me realize how much that the relationships with the people that you care about is really what it's all about.
Seeing the kids' smiles and happiness of the kids on a daily basis coming back to school makes it solidifies that we're doing the right thing by kids, and that they are here, they are loved, they're taken care of, they're getting meals, they're getting an education, and that's why we do it. And if it's not about the kids when they're in the wrong profession, but it's also great to have these kids in a place in all of our locations that is warm and it's welcoming.
I really feel like people will look back and say, this is what this community hub is meant to be.
We're a part of this community, and not just Valley Cruces. If it was any other school, you know, that we would be there to be a part of that solution.
Watauga's school system, it's not just Watauga's school system, it's this whole community school system. And I think the way that our partners have really come together really highlights that. It's, you know, everybody's taking care of our kids in this county, and I think that that support, I think we'll see the benefits of that long term.
That's the next generation of our workforce. It's the next generation of our workforce that got back to school as uninterrupted as they could. And now they're in places where, as was mentioned, they've got an opportunity to see themselves moving on and getting that knowledge that we're going to need them to have. So this isn't just a today thing. This is about the relationships that will make tomorrow possible here. So hopefully that's a little bit of motivation for you to think about the relationships that you can impact. This series will be, we'll have one of these documentaries released every month from now through the spring. So continue to stay tuned. We've got many more stories just like this one that will inspire you and show you again that out of a lot of darkness came the very best of us, right? And that's what's going to get us through this period of time. It is now an opportunity, speaking of inspiration, to recognize 3 businesses that have inspired, they have persevered, and they have performed, flat out performed during 2024. Carolina Mountain Title returns to help us present the 2024 Watauga County Business of the Year Awards. At this time, I would like to please welcome to the stage Lindsay Ennis.
Thank you. Good morning. Yep. My name is Lindsay Ennis. I'm with Carolina Mountain Title. We are a business located here in Boone. We issue title insurance services for commercial and residential real estate transactions. This is our 3rd year sponsoring the Business of the Year Awards, and we are so appreciative to the Chamber for partnering with us to allow us to do this again this year. It's been quite a year. I didn't write a speech. I wrote some notes in the car. So this is what procrastination looks like here, guys. It has been quite a year. As it's been mentioned already, Hurricane Helene really did a number on our region, destroying homes and businesses. It's been a very trying time for everybody, and it's going to continue to be a very trying time, hopefully sooner rather than later, but probably for years to come. It's important for us to recognize businesses that not only survived during the storm, but managed to thrive. And we are excited to be here today to celebrate those businesses. It's been a really heartwarming experience to see the communities band together and business owners support each other, take each other in, and help as they could. And that goes to the heart of who we are as a community. But now more than ever, it's important that we lift up each other and celebrate the accomplishments of these businesses that are being recognized here today. So with that, I'll turn it back over to David so we can present these awards.
Thank you very much. All right, our first business is our Startup Business of the Year. A reminder that eligible businesses have to be in business for 3 years or less to qualify for this award. This particular business is helping bring to the forefront one of the most important healthcare topics in the world today. Offering the High Country's only pelvic therapy clinic in the High Country, they provide specialized health services to all demographics, genders, and ages. Their certified therapists not only provide quality care, but important informational talks and discussions that can help make mainstream the importance of pelvic health for everyone. This is a woman-owned business that has shown up for their community as well, active supporters in organizations like Girls on the Run and the High Country Breast Cancer Foundation. Please join us in congratulating the 2024 Startup Business of the Year, Wonder Pelvic Therapy and Wellness.
Oh, can y'all hear me? Okay, cool. I'm Tiffany. My business partner, Aaron Wonder, is not able to be here today, unfortunately, but I'm the co-founder of Wonder Pelvic Therapy. But I'm happy to be able to express our deepest gratitude to the Chamber of Commerce for this incredible honor. When we opened our doors to our pelvic therapy clinic a year and a half ago, our goal was simple: to improve the pelvic health of our community and to empower everyone to live healthier, more confident lives. What we didn't anticipate was how quickly this community would rally around us, supporting this vision and with open hearts and trust. A big thank you to our team, a lot of them are here today, that works really hard to ensure our patients leave feeling a little lighter, stronger, and maybe even with a good laugh. It's not lost on us how brave it is to have sensitive conversations about taboo topics and to take the big step of seeking treatment. We are so grateful to this community and our providers that place such confidence in us. Finally, a quick word about small businesses. Starting one is a little like working on your pelvic floor. Building strength takes time, patience, and a lot of support. But with a strong foundation, the possibilities are endless. Thank you again for this award and for making our first year such a memorable one. Here's to strengthening our community together. Thank you.
Congratulations, Tiffany. Congratulations.
All right. Our next honoree demonstrated exceptional resilience during the Hurricane Helene response, providing free meals, distributing recovery gear, and spearheading community-driven initiatives to support those in need. As an evolving brand, this business also experienced impressive growth over the last year in both sales and workforce, making a significant and positive impact on the local economy while also enhancing the overall well-being of our community. Innovative offerings like all-inclusive destination trips have helped cultivate a loyal and expanding customer base, setting new standards within their own industry. Finally, their use of local resources should be commended, supporting neighboring businesses that not only promote environmental sustainability, but also sets a positive example of responsible, community-focused industry practices. Please help us recognize our 2024 Watauga County Small Business of the Year, Speckled Trout Outfitters.
I think so. Yes, let's.
Thanks. Let me get my little sentences out here. I'm Joel Brown. I'm one of the fishing guides at the Speckled Trout Outfitters. And this is Reed Connor. He's our general manager of the Outfitters. On behalf of the Speckled Trout Outfitters and people sitting at these tables up here, as well as a larger team, we just are humbled and honored to receive this esteemed award. The achievement is the direct result of our entire team's hard work and dedication to creating a space where everyone feels welcome and valued. And while we never seek recognition or accolades, the success we've experienced this year is truly thanks to our owners, the Brinkers. If you haven't had the chance to meet them, I encourage you to do so at some point today before you leave. Will, Erica, Eric, and Emily, you embody the core values that we live by: integrity, stewardship, excellence, community, authenticity, and fun. I speak for our entire team when I say it's a privilege to follow your lead, both professionally and personally. Your leadership during the Helene response was just another powerful demonstration of what we've always known, that you consistently put others before yourselves. Thank you.
All right, last but not least, you know this business, you might not know this business by its name, but you certainly know them by their architecture. Boone's two-story Wendy's. They brought you America's first two-story Wendy's. They also brought our community one of the most decorated franchises in the country. Within the Wendy's family, they stand atop. Within the nation, among franchisees, they're one of the top 100 largest organizations of their kind in the country. With a regional reach that brings Frosties and those delicious fries to so many, they are equally committed to the communities that they serve on a daily basis where those stores are located. And they show that impact the most in their own backyard. Supporters of Watauga High School athletics, App State athletics, Samaritan's Purse and their endeavors, and so many other things. They had 7 impacted restaurants during Hurricane Helene throughout the region. Their first action, tend to their team. Their second action, provide food, water, and necessary supplies in the communities that they serve. This business stretches beyond the limits of Watauga County, but every time they do, they bring a little bit of us along with them. Please welcome our 2024 Large Business of the Year winner, Tar Heel Capital.
There's anybody out there really taking pictures. I don't think so.
Okay.
Here, you just keep.
That's okay. Can I keep this? All right. Thank you. Thank you, David. That was very nice. I have to say, we're just truly honored, to receive this award here for Large Business of the Year. And I accept it on behalf of Tar Heel Capital and Wendy's. My name is Tad Dahlbeer. I'm the CEO of Tar Heel Capital. The recognition reflects the hard work, the passion, the commitment of our entire team that's poured into this organization over the last 47 years. And I'm proud to accept it on their behalf. When Jim and Dick Furman opened the first Wendy's here in Boone back in 1977 with their partners, they thought they could perhaps grow to 4 or 5 Wendy's. But never did they dream that they would have 87 restaurants in 3 states. They just knew they wanted to get into the restaurant business, and they had a small connection to Wendy's. It also helped that they loved Wendy's hamburgers. They had a vision for building their business carefully, bringing people along with them, aspiring to glorify God in all they do. I joined the company in 1980 and have been one of those who've been greatly blessed by their vision. The journey wasn't without its challenges. Like many of you, the impacts of increasing building and commodity costs, labor shortages, increasing interest rates, and of course, an occasional pandemic or 1,000-year flood keeps things very interesting. The resilience and adaptability of our team were tested and strengthened, and we have grown more determined to thrive through it all. We often say that it's not just about what we do, but how we do it. Integrity is the foundation of any small business. And Dave Thomas, Wendy's founder, summed it up really simply. He would say, do the right thing, just be nice, give something back. But he would also remind us, profit is not a dirty word. At Tar Heel Capital, we also believe in those simple principles. We also believe the Bible is the best business book that's ever been written. The Lord has blessed us immensely for us to achieve what we have, and we remain on a path of steady growth for the foreseeable future. We have some of our local team here today. We've got Jim and Dick Furman, our owners. Ty Darner is our CFO. Leslie Cook is our controller. Michael Buttons, HR manager. Jim Furman Jr. is our vice president of operation, and his wife, Megan. So I accept it on behalf of this entire team. I would like to thank the Boone Chamber of Commerce for its recognition. They've been a rock, especially during these very challenging times. Our local business community should feel very fortunate to have such a strong advocate in Boone and Watauga County. We're honored and inspired by this award, and will continue to strive to be great partners in Boone, Blowing Rock, and Watauga County, and each of the communities that we do business in. We are privileged to be a part of them. Thank you.
All right, it is now my distinct pleasure to introduce James Young, the Senior Vice President of Skyline National Bank, for a few closing comments on behalf of our businesses of the year.
Thank you, David. Good morning. I'm James Young, and on behalf of Skyline National Bank, it is an honor to join you today. Skyline National Bank has a long history of standing with our communities. Since our founding in 1900, just 40 miles north of this spot, we've been deeply committed to helping families, businesses, and local organizations thrive, even in the face of challenges. Together, we've weathered storms, both literal and economic, and come out stronger, thanks to the collaborative spirit of this region. Both our new office on Highway 321 and our recent merger with Johnson County Bank reflect that commitment. These milestones allow us to better serve this community with the local and personalized service that you expect. We'd love for you to stop by our new office and see how Skyline can help you achieve your financial goals. It was 9 years ago the Boone area and Blowing Rock Chambers of Commerce came together to reignite this annual event. Today, we take opportunity publicly to thank longtime Blowing Rock Chamber President Charles Hardin for his many years of service to this community, and for his commitment to strengthen relationships across Watauga County. As he embarks upon his well-deserved retirement, let us wish him well and remind him that he'll always have a place at the table in key discussions in Watauga County. Please welcome Charles Hardin.
Thank you so much. And thank you for this partnership that the Chambers have had for the past 9 years. It's been a great ride. I remember the Ski Mountain year, first year, 85 of us packed in that small room. It's changed a lot. Look at the size of this room. And I also want to thank Dr. Davis. He's also been a big partner in this over the years. I know somebody else is going to recognize him in a minute. But, you know, he's kind of like a weather forecaster. He has to guess at this kind of thing in a lot of ways. And then if he gets it wrong, he can just go on, right? We're going to deal with it. Many of you have heard of the rumors of my retirement and probably surprised to even see me here today. It's supposed to have been January 6th, but my board has asked me to stay through Winterfest, which is an important event for our chamber. So I'll be leaving on January 31st. It has truly been an honor and a pleasure to serve this community for the past 21 years in this position, and I thank our board of directors for that opportunity. We have a lot of partnerships at the chamber. There are many people that we serve alongside of, our staff, our board of directors, our volunteers, the other chambers in our region, many of who are here today, our town leadership, our tourism development folks, the university, and then there are so many others that I cannot mention at this time. I'm reminded that all of us are not doing this alone or on our own power. We are all standing on the shoulders of giants, those who have gone before us to forge the path that we are on today. Next generation, many of you are out there. Take a look around the room. You'll soon be taking the lead, as those before you will be moving on. You too will be carrying the load as we continue to improve and enhance the life for the citizens of our community. Work together, because little is accomplished by working on your own. At this time, it is my pleasure to introduce my replacement as the CEO of the Chamber in Blowing Rock. Comes to us from Florida, and she's had a really exciting week here the past week. She is on Ski Mountain, temporarily living, and you know what conditions of the roads are probably like up there. But Robin Miller comes to us from the Tampa Bay area of Florida. Robin.
Y'all are going to get used to me pulling the mic down. Thank you so much. That is a tough act to follow, and as I've been told, some very big shoes. And I personally am extremely honored that this community has, and the board of directors have selected me to be a part of the chamber, the town of Blowing Rock, and really everywhere I've gone, just being embraced in your community. So I'm looking forward to the next year ahead and standing up here with David next year and talking about all the great accomplishments that the two chambers are going to be doing together in the coming months. I cannot get to a podium without promoting something. And so, as Charles alluded to, Winterfest. And I've been told, and I'm coining the phrase, don't hibernate, celebrate. And then I say, participate, right? This is your community event. There is so much going on. The infamous polar plunge, chili cook-off, savor wine, a great auction that all of this will support your local community nonprofits. So I know you have phones in your hands that are all on vibrate for sure. There's QR code when you leave. You can purchase your tickets as you walk out the door. I look forward to seeing those tickets come in today and seeing you all there while you show me what you do in the winter, because as Charles said, it's been quite interesting this last week for me. I have the pleasure to introduce your next speaker here. It is your title sponsor, Mr. Chuck Eiler. He is the president of Southeast Mountains Branch High Street Insurance and Financial Partners. I've been told that he has been a wonderful partner of this event since its inception. So please welcome to the stage, Mr. Chuck Eiler.
She just said, nice to meet you. So we haven't even met yet. So that's how new she is. Hoping to get to that. Thank you guys and welcome. As you know, brevity is not my strong point. And if you don't know what brevity means, it means I talk too much. So I need to get out of the way for Mr. Joe Stewart, who's a dear friend of mine and coming up today as our speaker. So let me just get a couple of key points and then I will get out of the way. Asking Joe to talk about the political landscape after an election in 30 minutes is a little bit like parting the Red Sea. And we did kind of have a red wave, right? So we'll work that in a little bit. He's an absolute delight, and I can't wait for you guys to hear from him. He said, do not read my bio. People can do that if they're still interested in me after they hear me talk. So I'll let you guys do that. I did want to mention one thing because obviously we have been Peak Insurance for quite some time and have changed that to a new partnership with High Street Insurance and Financial Services. We needed to rebrand, and I'll tell you a quick story. In my driveway this week, because I'm doing a little bit of a house remodel, there is a Peak sanitation dumpster, and I keep being, my neighbors said, you're really taking this Peak thing to heart, and I don't own Peak sanitation, so, and they have nothing to do with Peak Insurance, but there are a lot of Peak businesses up here. But at any rate, we are rebranding to High Street, and that is more about our partnerships in the region. We are growing. We now have First Security Insurance out of Hickory is a part of us. We have, of course, Peak Insurance, which goes to Winston-Salem all the way to Raleigh and Charlotte. We also have Miller Insurance is now one of our partners out of West Jefferson. Grateful to have that team. And our newest team coming on board is the Yates Insurance Agency out of Johnson City, Tennessee. So that puts us, it's pretty big regional player with a lot of progress moving forward in a difficult insurance industry, as you guys can imagine, in the last year. So I'm really proud of that with the storm and everything that we've had to navigate along with you guys. So a couple more things. I really liked the message today. I keep hearing it, and of course we did the same thing. I checked on my employees first. And then we got immediately to work with anything we could benefit this community after the storm. I challenged everyone last year to look around this room and find someone you can partner with, as we've done. We really are better together, and there's a lot of opportunity there. And I keep hearing the coming together and the partnership theme. And you saw it evident in the storm, and I think we're all closer now because of that. But again, look around today and ask yourself that same question. Who can you collaborate with? Who can you partner with? That's how we keep moving forward as a community. Joe Stewart is the Vice President of Governmental Affairs at the Independent Insurance Agents or Association of North Carolina, which I was the chair of the Government Relations Committee for about 3 years. And so never not an interesting year in the world of insurance, but this has been a particularly interesting year. And Joe is an investor in our community too. His daughter just graduated from Appalachian State, which we are proud to have had that happen. And the only thing I read from Joe's bio is the only interesting tidbit he puts on there is that at one point he was the chief deputy treasurer in North Carolina, putting him, and he actually was eligible for the license plate number 50, which means he was 49 heartbeats away from governor if anything should happen to those people. So just a little bit away. So thank God, Joe, none of that ever happened, but you would have been a terrific governor. Ladies and gentlemen, Joe Stewart.
Thank you, Chuck. The challenge was all 49 of them would have had to die at the same moment for me to be governor, so I don't think it was ever really possible. Thank you for this opportunity to be here, and thank you, Chancellor. You've produced another great graduate of Appalachian State. My daughter, Wilhelmina, started in the wildlife rehabilitation program at the North Carolina Zoo, a biology major here at Appalachian State. And my first time on the campus here, I'm a native of Raleigh. In my junior high school years, I came up to a summer camp here at Appalachian, but it was long enough ago. I believe the dorm that we stayed in has now been torn down, so it's a while back. As Chuck alluded to, I'm the Vice President for Governmental Affairs with the Independent Insurance Agents, but prior to this time, I ran the Free Enterprise Foundation, which is a political research organization, and so did presentations like this all across the state and still do get called upon from time to time. A couple of places to highlight as we get started this presentation. One is the story of North Carolina politically is really being driven by the demographic changes that are taking place, the growth in the population and the diversification. What used to be our political divide was east and west, and the western part of the state was more dominated by Republicans and the east more by Democrats, really a function of the years following the Civil War. But now the political nexus of the state is really urban versus rural in terms of people's partisan identities. And we're a state that's changing demographically. The little town of Morrisville outside of Raleigh now has a cricket pitch where international cricket competitions come and play, in large part because 25% of the population of the town of Morrisville, North Carolina, are Indian Americans, people that come from the country of India. They're citizens of the United States, they're lawful registered voters here, but it's an incredible diversification of our population. Now, coupled with that is generationally, we're seeing a change in the way young people think of partisan identity and ideological disposition. And so the whole definition of what it means to be a Democrat or a Republican or a liberal or a conservative is changing somewhat as the younger generation of Americans comes online as voters. And the final thing is in the year 2025, George Jetson turns 3. Now, the Jetsons was launched in 1962 and was projected to be what the world would be like in 100 years. And George Jetson, the character, was 40. So George was born 3 years ago. The innovations that are occurring in our culture and our society relative to technology are also casting a long shadow over our politics. The Federal Elections Commission just recently concluded a task force. They brought in a technology expert from MIT because they wanted to see if it would be possible to imagine a future where people could vote using their smartphones. Because the generations coming up are doing everything on their smartphones. They said, is it possible that we could affect the kind of election security necessary for the elections to be conducted on your phone, where you would just stop and vote on election day? And they said sort of the biometric features of the devices would give some great assurance of the identity of the voter. It's the transmission of the data and maintaining that integrity. They said it's probably not, we're not ready to do that yet. But the way people are receiving information about politics is so much different than it's ever been, and it's constant. It's 24 hours a day now, and it's very hard to determine the authenticity of content because everybody has the ability to push out whatever it is they think and can contend something is true even if they can't really substantiate it. So the state is changing, the nature of politics is changing, the way we conduct politics is changing, and all of that is influencing the political landscape here in North Carolina. Now, according to the Census Bureau, this is the growth pattern expected for North Carolina over the next decade. You can see the counties in the darker blue are the ones that are projected to grow the most, and the ones that are gray are going to lose population. So even though the state continues to grow at about 100,000, 120,000 new citizens every year, the state's growth pattern is not consistent and even. Half of all of the in-migration into the state each year is just into Wake and Mecklenburg counties. And so you see the dramatic urbanization of North Carolina. When we talk about the political nexus now being urban versus rural, North Carolina now has something it's not had historically. It has great big cities. And when you have that kind of populational density, it changes the way people perceive the value proposition of government and influences the way that they think about politics. Now, these 12 dots, any idea what those are? That's half of the state's voters. Half of the state's voters live in 12 counties. So if you want to win statewide office in North Carolina and you launched your campaign saying, I'm going to visit all 100 counties, that's irrelevant to what it takes to win in North Carolina. These 12 counties make the difference in our elections. Now, the diversification of our population, too, is a critical point. If you look at it on an age cohort basis, we are getting older. Baby boomers like me are living longer. So it's driving up the average age in North Carolina. And you can see the diversity of our population is really starting to be significantly different than it's been historically. But this is what matters the most. The chart on the bottom is the demographic breakdown of children under the age of 4. Now, currently in North Carolina, about 10% of the population is Hispanic. 20% of the state's population of children under the age of 4 is Hispanic. So we have no history of significant second-generation American participants in the electoral process. We have a very large segment of the voting base that will be people who have been born in North Carolina. Their parents may not have come here lawfully, but they were born. They're native North Carolinians. They speak Spanish principally at home, and they will be, at some point in the next 10 to 15 years, 20% of the state's registered voters. And that's just a very significantly different demographic dynamic for a state. We know a lot about what second-generation Americans do in terms of their voting participation. We just don't have that experience here in North Carolina. Now, here's the partisan affiliation of the current voter registration in North Carolina. We've seen this trend where now the plurality of voters are unaffiliated. In North Carolina, you can still vote in a partisan primary as an unaffiliated registered voters. As a voter, the Democrats and Republicans are still equally about a third. Probably this number of unaffiliated voters will become 50%. It will be the majority of registered voters within the next couple of election cycles would be my guess. But these people are not nonpartisan. Their intensity of support for Democratic or Republican candidates is like a dimmer switch as you go up and down the ballot. Probably only about 15% at most of registered voters are truly unaffiliated with a political party. But this is a dynamic, and principally the growth in unaffiliated has been first-time registrants, meaning people moving to the state or people turning 18 and registering to vote. And so this is a reflection of that changing dynamic in terms of people and their perception of what it means to be a Democrat and Republican. Now, this is a chart from a good friend of mine, Paul Shoemaker, is a Republican political consultant. Paul tracks in the polling that he's done going back to the 1990s. Now, if you look at this chart, this is when you're asked a question on a poll, regardless of your registration. Do you consider yourself Democrat, Republican, or unaffiliated? Do you consider yourself ideologically conservative, liberal, or moderate? And you can see among all of the people that are self-identified as Republicans, the top line number, and as you go up on this chart, it's more conservative. As you go down, it's more liberal. You can see self-identified Republicans over the last 3 decades have more or less consistently identified themselves as pretty conservative. But the chart to look is, if you go back to the 1990s, self-identified Democrats on this 100-point scale up and down, conservative and liberal, on average, Democrats in the state in 1990 were right of center. They were ideologically conservative, even though they were Democrats. We see the average ideological disposition and unaffiliated, their disposition has remained relatively consistent, but you can see the self-identified Democrats have become increasingly liberal. And so the dynamic in our politics is we have what we've never had in North Carolina before. We have urban liberals, which is just a phenomena of very large metropolitan centers. Again, I'm not saying it's good or bad. That's just the reality of what happens when the growth is principally in major metropolitan areas. Oops, the chart got kind of screwed up there in the translation. But significantly, this is the racial composition of the registered voters in the state. 1 out of every 20% of all of the children in this state today have at least one parent that was born in another country. 1/5 of the children have a parent who is not a Native American. And so that diversification of our population is significant. And this chart of the counties shows where the greater concentration of foreign-born parents are, and you can see it's more or less consistent with the growth patterns for the state as a whole. Now, if you go back to the last 3 presidential elections, the counties are colored based on which of the party's candidates won the race. You can see more or less consistently our presidential elections are played out in the same counties, election after election. You can see in the most recent election, because Josh Stein, and this is also the gubernatorial contest on the right side and the presidential contest on the left, Stein won by a pretty considerable margin, 15 percentage points, which is a very unusual result in a statewide race. But he won a little bit more of that section of the state, sort of in the northeastern end of it. But more or less, our statewide races are played out the same way and have been consistently over the last several election cycles. Now, these are the Council of State, the governor, lieutenant governor, and 8 other statewide executive branch elected offices. The darker line between 2012 and 2016 is when the state did away with straight ticket voting. So it used to be you could vote once and you would vote for all of one party's candidates all the way down the ballot. So you could see the performance of Democratic candidates for Council of State races has become more consistent for Republicans since we did away with straight ticket voting. Some of that is increasingly a portion of North Carolina voters will go back and forth between the two parties' candidates in these statewide races based on what little bit of information they may have about a candidate that they like or dislike. So we're going to see consistently the leadership of our executive branch of state government is split between Democrats and Republicans. That's likely to continue. These are the congressional races in 2014. In 2024. We now have 14 congressional districts. 10 are held by Republicans, 4 by Democrats. The really only competitive congressional race based on the historical voting patterns of people there was in the 1st district in the Northeast. And so that one, Don Davis, the incumbent, won pretty handily. But the way the districts are drawn, it's very likely to produce an incumbent of one party or the other. And so the races really become more significant in the primary, because the race is going to produce an incumbent of one party or the other in the fall. Who wins that party's primary becomes the more important race. Now, looking at the same calculation of voter disposition in the state legislative districts, and again, it's based on historical voting patterns. This is just where people are in terms of their partisan orientation in a particular part of the state. We rate each of the legislative districts. And so in this election cycle, the question was, could the Republicans maintain a supermajority, meaning did they have enough votes in the Senate and the House of the North Carolina General Assembly to override a gubernatorial veto on a party line vote? That's 30 in the Senate and 72 in the House. In this election result, it was very close for the Republicans to be able to retain the supermajority. That they did not get to that number in the House. They did in the Senate, but there's at least 4 Democrats in the House that at least in part have expressed some willingness to perhaps vote with Republicans on a gubernatorial override should one be necessary going forward. And so for all practical purposes, the Republicans do have a supermajority in both the House and Senate. The Speaker, Destin Hall, who's an App grad, Destin Hall said that the House has a practical supermajority, so I think that's true. So the bottom line, thinking about this legislative session that starts at the end of the month, the Republicans are probably going to be able to override any veto Josh Stein makes of legislation. We'll cut those out just for the time purpose. All right, so things to think about. The first real iteration of the legislature, the Senate has to confirm Governor Stein's cabinet secretary appointments. We'll see if the governor gets along with the House and Senate Republican leadership. That's probably the first test. We know that the 2026, the next election cycle, typically midterm elections go against the party in control of the White House. And so by historical standards, Democrats can expect 26 might well be a good year for them. There may be some factor in that in terms of Governor Stein thinking that he has a better chance of breaking the supermajority in the House and Senate in 26. In 26, we have a Senate race, U.S. Senate race on the ballot. We did not have a Senate race in 2024. There's already one announced opponent for Tom Tillis in the Republican primary. Wiley Nickel, who was a congressman, chose not to run for re-election, already made it pretty clear he's going to seek the Democratic nomination. Some speculation that Roy Cooper, the immediate past governor, is going to run for the U.S. Senate in 26. I don't think that's as likely as some other people do. I think Roy Cooper has been in public office for 40 years. I think he's really looking forward to actually getting to make some money in his life. And again, the big issues are really about dealing with a structural imbalance in our state's budget. We have about a $5 billion hole in terms of revenue collections projected going forward over the next 5 years. Substantively, that's got to be addressed by the General Assembly at some point. Somehow they have to come up with enough revenue to make sure that the state doesn't end up with a pretty considerable lack of resources to meet all of its obligations. There's a lot that's got to be done, not the least of which is the continued recovery here in the West. And we have a lot of pressure taking place in the insurance markets. As you know, there's about $150 billion worth of damage that's already been done in Southern California that's going to create a tremendous amount of pressure in the insurance markets all across the country. That's going to affect here in North Carolina, where we face considerable perils, not to seem too dire. All of the fuel that's on the forest floor now as a result of Helene has led the designation of North Carolina as being the #1 state in terms of wildfire peril for this calendar year. So we've got a lot of challenges here in North Carolina to get that done. In terms of the national administration, Donald Trump will be sworn into office on Monday. A little bit of a positive feeling in the economy. The question is some of the proposals that President-elect Trump has announced, including tariffs. The question is, does that actually have the beneficial impact on the economy? Generally, voters are focused on economic issues, so going into the 2026 elections, whether or not it's a big wave election year for Democrats may largely be driven by what the condition of the economy is by that time. A lot of bad stuff is going on around the world. North Korea is now fighting with the Russians in Ukraine. There's at least 7 civil wars taking place in nations in Africa right now. The Middle East is in chaos. All of those have the very real potential to overtake whatever domestic policy issues the new presidential administration is trying to address. Just a lot of problems that could occur on a global basis. And I think that has a real, very real impact of influencing voter attitudes heading into 26 as well. The questions about hurricane recovery here, I know that the leadership of the General Assembly, both the Senate leader, Phil Berger, and the new Speaker, Destin Hall, have expressed a real commitment to address the needs of Western North Carolina and the parts of the state that have been impacted by the hurricane. Governor Stein, in his first act, brought attention to some of the needs that were present here in the West. He's already appointed someone that will be the person in charge of the recovery efforts, now former county commissioner in Wake County. I think some of the challenges are, as you know, Elon Musk has been announced to head this initiative to try to remove inefficiencies in the federal government. The question, does that impact what the Department of Homeland Security and FEMA, which is where FEMA is housed? Is there a potential for disruption in the terms of the distribution of federal assistance as a result of those changes? At the state level, you may recall Governor Cooper's person heading up the recovery and resilience effort following Hurricane Florence and Matthew was fired last year. The General Assembly is very concerned and has expressed that concern about the way that the executive branch handles disaster recovery. We're probably going to see a lot more legislative oversight of the recovery effort of Helene. So a lot of the state appropriations will have to be scrutinized by legislative oversight committees in a way that we've not done historically. The other challenge is, of course, as you know, there's a lot of distrust among the citizens about large institutions, including government. There were some real challenges that FEMA officials here in the West faced in terms of misinformation that was being promulgated. The logistics of recovery efforts is problematic. The Department of Transportation just announced they've had a significant number of road reopenings in the West, but there's a lot of work that's got to be done. This is undoubtedly a decades-long initiative to fully restore Western North Carolina. So a lot of challenges. And if there's any insight that I can offer you, it's important to remain engaged, not only with your local elected officials, but with people within the gubernatorial administration about the ongoing needs and challenges that you're faced having to recover from Helene. And in part, I would say this, and I'll conclude with this, just as a word of caution. There are 2 big issues that are likely to come up during this state legislative session. One is an issue from the previous legislative session, where State Senator Bill Rabin, who's chair of the Senate Rules Committee, very powerful member of the state Senate, feels very strongly from a personal experience with a battle with cancer that he faced about the need for the state to legalize the use of medical marijuana. Now, legislation to authorize that did pass the state Senate, but it failed in the House. And Senator Rabin has made it clear that he continues to be supportive of this notion and wants to have this issue come back up before the General Assembly in this session. Now, the challenge is, does that issue become a point of contention between the House and the Senate? Both are controlled by Republicans, but on this, the House has been resistant to the idea of legalizing medical marijuana in the state. So when there's a big issue like this, where the House and Senate are really in a different place, a lot of times other issues that they may have otherwise agreed upon become hostage to the discussion around that particular issue. This happened to the extent last legislative session that the General Assembly was not able to enact an adjustment to the second year of the state's biennial budget. Even though the House and the Senate agreed principally to the contents of the budget, because of the dispute over medical marijuana, they weren't able to actually get a completed budget document done. And so my fear is even issues like Hurricane Helene relief money out of the state legislature that both chambers agree is essential and important. The peril is that it becomes a point of negotiation between the House and the Senate over the issue of medical marijuana. There's also discussion about the legalization of video gaming terminals, and that may also be an issue that raises its ugly head and holds hostage other issues that the Senate and House would otherwise agree. On this issue, the Senate is supportive of the idea of expanding the collection of revenue from gaming by authorizing video terminals, and the House is not in agreement. So that's why I think my advice to you is to remain engaged. Do not assume that your legislative allies, and I'm sure your delegation here fully understands and is committed to what's necessary to get additional state assistance to continue the recovery. This is all internal politics to the legislature. It's got nothing to do with the merit of what the funding is actually for. It's just the nature of politics that sometimes bigger issues overtake what fundamentally legislators might otherwise agree to. So for that reason, I would say, as Thomas Jefferson said, eternal vigilance is the price of liberty. And so you really do need to remain in constant contact with your state legislators on these issues. And so with that, I'll conclude, and thank you for this opportunity to come speak to you. Half hour is a tough allotment of time to get through all of the nuances of North Carolina politics. I said if you wanted me to talk about Vermont politics, that takes about 15 minutes. It's still mostly Bernie Sanders and maple syrup. It hasn't changed in 20 years. But North Carolina is a dynamic and changing place. And what we can expect in terms of our politics in the next decade is very difficult to use historical data to try to anticipate, just because the changes that are taking place are so incredibly dynamic. With that, thank you very much for this opportunity.
Those two things on the screen that you just saw a second ago, not to be used together, okay? So just know that. Chamber endorsement for that, all right? It's my pleasure right now to bring up our next speaker to introduce Dr. Harry Davis. Brad Greer, another one of our great sponsors from Allen Wealth Management, here to say a few words. Thank you, Brad.
Thanks, David. Thank you, Joe, too. That was interesting. Well, it's my pleasure to introduce our next speaker. Many of you know Dr. Davis, but you may be unfamiliar with all he's done. So I'd like to take a few moments to share some of his accomplishments with you. His formal education began at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, go Hills, where he received a BS in economics. He then went on to receive his master's in economics from Vanderbilt University before receiving his PhD in finance from the University of Georgia. He is the professor of banking and economist for the North Carolina Bankers Association, and he told me just before today's meeting started that on September 30th, just a couple of days after Hurricane Helene, he was inducted into the North Carolina Bankers Association Hall of Fame. Did I get that right? Okay. So as their economist, he puts together quarterly economic forecasts that are carried by various news outlets. He is frequently interviewed throughout the year by newspapers, television, and radio stations for stories on the economy and banking. And he is a frequent speaker at state, regional, and national banking conventions on economic and banking issues. He is also the dean as well as an instructor for the North Carolina School of Banking, and additionally was an instructor for the North Carolina Insurance Executive Management School and the South Carolina School of Banking from 2006 to 2016. Dr. Davis is active in the consulting field, and he has presented seminars to business groups both in North Carolina and nationwide. He puts together feasibility plans, business plans, and valuations for both financial and non-financial corporations. He has served as a consultant for numerous startup banks in North Carolina, and recently he presented remarks to over 900 financial leaders throughout the state at the NC Bankers Association Economic Kickoff Luncheon, co-sponsored by the NC Chamber. A little closer to home, He has helped start a local bank in Boone and served on its board of directors for over 20 years. Dr. Davis is presently on the board of directors of Life Store Bank, and he is also on the advisory board for the Western Youth Network. And many of us know him as professor of finance at Appalachian State University from 1981 to 1998. Specific to this organization, he is the past chairman of the board of the Boone Area Chamber of Commerce and continues to serve on the board. He authors a quarterly summary of current economic conditions as part of the Chamber's Economic Indicator Report Series. And finally, my notes say you're delivering your 8th annual economic update, but I know this is the 9th event. Did you miss the first one?
Wasn't good news.
Wasn't good news, okay. Got it. Well, in any event, please help me in welcoming Dr. Harry Davis.
Thank you very much, Brad. In fact, I just met Brad a few minutes ago, and I'm looking forward to meeting Robin. I have not met her. Joe, I met you today, and I very much enjoyed your remarks. Thank you very much for being here, and thanks to all the award winners. And Charles Hardin, it's been great knowing you over the years and being a part of this. And of course, you know that God created weathermen to make economists look good. I mean, I am going to talk about economics, but before I get started, I have been a part of this all 9 years. So this is my 9th year. I was there at the very first one. David, I heard of a guy recently who spoke to the same organization for 25 consecutive years. Did y'all see that? David just asked the person sitting next to him, did he say 25 years? In 8 to 10 years, David, I won't even be able to find this room. But now, you know, I do like to tell jokes, and sometimes I tell them they're not very funny, but I'll keep telling them. Now, I think that's the definition of idiocy, to just keep doing it and hoping for a different result. I view it more as a do-over. It's a little bit like getting remarried. And you know what remarriage is. Remarriage is the victory of optimism over experience. I do have some jokes that really are bad. They're not funny. Nobody ever laughs. They should have never been written, and they should have never been told. In fact, we'd be a lot better off if these jokes had never, ever existed and we knew nothing about them. You know what I call those jokes? Kardashians. Now, you know, economists, we're notorious for never, ever really coming down with a conclusion. We say stuff, we hedge our bets, we never, ever will tell you exactly what we think about something. You know, the old joke about economists was if you took all the economists in the world and laid them into N, they still wouldn't reach a conclusion. The new joke is if you took all the economists in the world and laid them into N, that would be a good thing. Now that joke works better with lawyers. I started to use lawyers on that one. Now, I want to tell you a joke that is not a dirty joke. If you think this is a dirty joke, it's because you have a dirty mind. Okay? So now I have everybody's attention. So, you know, economists they come up with these forecasts for employment, new job growth, GDP growth, all this stuff. And we're wrong quite a bit of the time. And so therefore, when we make a forecast, sometimes it leads to an unfulfilled expectation. Unfulfilled expectation. Now this reminds me of a story I heard about an anatomy professor here at ASU. And she went into class one day and she asked this question of the class. What part of the human body grows to 6 times its original size in the dark? And she looked out at the class and nobody would say anything. And she called on Miss Merriweather and she said, do you know the answer to this question? And Miss Merriweather sat there and she squirmed around in her chair and she got red in the face, and finally she said, I can't answer that question in mixed company. And the professor turned to another student and said, do you know the answer to this question? The student said, yes, it's the pupil of the eye. And just so you'll know, that is in fact the right answer. The professor turned back to Miss Merriweather and said, I just want to say 3 things to you. First of all, you did not read the assignment. Secondly, you have a dirty mind. And third, you will live a life of unfulfilled expectations. Okay. All right, let's talk economics and about the economy. First of all, GDP growth last year was about 2.5%. The fourth quarter numbers, of course, are not in yet. It may have actually been a little better than 2.5, which really in the post-World War II period is not that bad. The average is above 3 in the post-World War II average, but 2.5% is not very bad. We're certainly not in a recession. We've been talking about getting in a recession now for 2 years. We still aren't in one, and we won't get in one this year. So we will not be in a recession this year. Other economies around the world would love to be in the shape we're in. Many of the countries in Europe are either in recession or right at recession. China is experiencing all kinds of trouble with overbuilt real estate. Their banks are having some issues. So China's having problems. They would love to have our economy. We've had 10 recessions in the post-World War period, and the average length of time for those recessions was about 10 months. I believe it's 12 recessions and 10 months was the average length. So recessions in the post-World War II period, except for the Great Recession in 2008 and 9, have really not been major downturns for the U.S. economy. The Consumer Confidence Index remains quite good in the United States. We take this every month. It was down in December, but remains above 100. So if you look at the graph of the Consumer Confidence Index and look at the vertical axis, you see 100. The index is virtually always, it's above 100. If it's above 100, that's pretty good actually. If it got down to around 85, that would suggest that consumers are very dissatisfied with the economy and they think that we're going into a recession or are already in a recession. Now, the growth in the economy is not even. The manufacturing sector continues to struggle. It's been struggling for 2 years, maybe 2.5 years. In the latest employment numbers that came out last Friday at 8:30 in the morning, manufacturing sector lost jobs. It continues to lose jobs, although not very many year over year, but the manufacturing sector does continue to struggle. The service sector is the sector of the economy that is carrying the economy. The service sector continues to do very well relative to manufacturing. They use an index and 50 is the threshold. If the index is below 50, that means it's in a contraction, and if it's above 50, that means it's in expansion. So if we look at the graph of the ISM Purchasing Managers Index, you'll see that it's below 50. Look at the vertical axis. The manufacturing sector can't get to 50, even though the last 2 months it's been up. It has been up on the extreme right-hand side, but it still can't quite get to 50, but it is looking a little bit better. The next graph shows the service sector, and again, look at the vertical axis, and you'll see that in the service sector, the numbers are above 50 virtually every single month. So the service sector is carrying the economy and continues to do that. Now, why do consumers feel so good? Average hourly earnings have been growing around 4% for the last 3 years. In the latest month, the latest figures from December, it was 3.9. But it's 3.9, 4, 4.1. And you can see on one of the bullets there, in real terms, those numbers have been growing for the last 20 months, the last 20 consecutive months. That's a very long time for real wages and earnings to be growing. So that's a very good thing, and that's why consumers feel as good as they do. In addition, in 2023 and 2024, the barrel price of oil actually fell, and the price of gas at the pump actually fell for the last 2 years. So that was another thing that in general makes consumers feel confident, makes them feel good that that price is going down rather than going up. So consumers have felt good, and that's been propelling the economy. In addition, corporate earnings. U.S. corporations are on a tear. They're doing very well. Earnings growth has been close to double digits, around 10% for the last 3 years. Now, there are always some problems. I got a slide that shows credit cards. Credit card balances are up. Credit card delinquencies are up. The rate on credit cards is up, and actually it's going up, which is amazing, but it is. So there are segments of the economy that are struggling. But debt levels of consumers are not all that high, really. Consumers are, again, debt levels aren't that high on a historic basis. Now, I've got a graph on the Fed funds rate, and this, it looks like I'm trying to get technical. I'm not. We looked at this last year. Over on the extreme right-hand side of the graph, you'll notice that it's coming down. So the Fed has lowered the Fed funds rate 1% in the last 3 meetings, 50 basis points, 0.5%, then 0.25%, and then another 0.25% in the last 3 meetings. They drove interest rates to 0, so we all did crazy things, right? Everybody in here went out and bought a new house. Everybody went out and bought a second house over the last 15 years. And it made perfect sense because the mortgage rates were at the lowest level in history. They've never been that low. And so people did all kinds of things. And of course, the stock market boomed over that same period because you couldn't make any money on cash or putting your money in the bank or in treasury securities. So you put it in the stock market. And so asset prices, of course, increased over that period. Now, mortgage rates have, of course, they were extremely low. They have, of course, come up since then. I believe the Fed, and this does get a little technical, I guess, should change interest rates by 25 basis points when they do it. Never do 50, never do 75. Take small steps and stop taking these big sweeping steps as they have been prone to do. In addition, the problem with the mortgage rate is the Fed lowers the Fed funds rate, but the Fed funds rate does not drive the mortgage rate. The mortgage rate is driven by the 10-year Treasury bond rate. If you're in real estate, you need to put that on your hand, write that down on your hand, and never forget it. It's the 10-year bond rate. So if you want to know what's going to happen to mortgage rates in 2 weeks, get up every morning and listen to Bloomberg and check out the 10-year Treasury bond rate. I do that every morning, which tells you how boring I am. I listen to it on XM radio over breakfast, and I actually listen to it when I'm on a treadmill, so I'm unbelievably boring. But the 10-year bond rate has gone up 1% in the last year. It's gone up 40 basis points, 0.4% in the last month. Now, it did go down yesterday, and I didn't check it this morning. I was actually so busy doing other stuff, I didn't get on Bloomberg this morning. So it did go down a little bit yesterday, but the mortgage rate, 30-year fixed, went above 7 last week, and it's going to stay above 7 for the foreseeable future as long as the 10-year bond rate is where it is. Now, the stock market, I mentioned it a minute ago, the stock market's been on a tear. It was at a record level 10 days ago, 2 weeks ago, and then last week it sort of swooned, sort of went down. Yesterday it had a great day, but overall the stock market has done extremely well. The S&P 500 stock index was up over 20% in 2023, and then up over 20% last year, 2024. 2 years in a row, over 20%. So if the stock market sort of swoons this year, that wouldn't be unexpected after having 2 really strong years. But again, in general, the stock market's been doing great ever since the Great Recession, ever since about 2010, let's say. Last year I said cash is great. Cash is still good. Last year you could get 5% for cash. Now you can get about 4%. That's not too bad, 4% and take no risk at all by putting in a bank where it's insured or putting in treasury bills. So cash is good. It's just not quite as good as it was a year ago. Now here's something about wealth. I think I've got a graph on net worth. The net worth of the American people just keeps going up. It's actually unbelievable. This is real net worth. This is adjusted for inflation. It's off the chart. It just keeps going up. And of course, that's because of your house, because of your 401k, and your businesses. If you own a business, the value of that thing is going up. But let me tell you just how stark, how incredible the wealth is of this country. And this is going to sound technical, but it is not. If you take the market capitalization of a company, like Amazon, you know how you do that? It's real simple. You multiply the market price of the stock of Amazon, we could look that up right this minute, and multiply that times the number of shares outstanding. So multiply the shares outstanding of Amazon times the market price, that's its market capitalization. In Germany, they have an index called the German DAX. It's equivalent to our Dow Jones Industrial Average. The Dow Jones Industrial Average has 30 companies. The German DAX has 30 companies. BMW, Mercedes, SAP, Bayer Aspen. If you take the market cap of all 30 companies, the largest, most successful companies in Germany, all 30 of them, and add them together, that number's not as big as the market cap of Amazon. Just one company in the United States. And Amazon's not the company in the United States with the biggest market cap. What company's that? NVIDIA. Who's second? Apple. So the wealth of this country is so much greater than the wealth of any other country on earth. It's just, you can't even compare it. It's not comparable, quite frankly. Now, the rate of inflation was, we were running it on a few months at 9%, but that's long gone. We're down to about 3%. That number was released yesterday, and it was right at 3%, 2.9, 3.2, depending on what part of the index you actually look at. It hasn't moved in the last 3 months. So the rate of inflation's been about 3%, and it's pretty much just been sitting there. And what is it that we care about when it comes to prices? And I made this point last year, and I think this turned out to be something in the election. Is it the rate of inflation that you care about, or is it the level of prices? I think it's the level of prices. I think people know what it cost to go to the grocery store 2 years ago. They know what it cost to go out to eat 2 years ago. And so it's the level of prices that's got people sort of their nose out of kink. Now, the Fed funds rate, I think, should be lowered in 25 basis point cuts. I think the Fed funds rate should be put in a range of 2.5% to 4.5%. And the Fed should never take it back to 0 or 1. Never do that again, because it leads to strange things in the economy. Try to take an even keel, and that's what I would like to see the Fed do as we go forward. The Fed generally is late. They make decisions too late. They were slow to start raising interest rates to slow the rate of inflation. Then they cut them 50 basis points. They should have cut them 25. So the Fed tends to show up for the game in the second or third inning rather than at the beginning of the game. They really need to spend a little bit more time looking at things and make quicker decisions. Now, I've got a slide that's called free trade, and I want to talk about this for a few minutes. I started this slide out with Reagan and Clinton, And then I was on my treadmill listening to Bloomberg on the day of Jimmy Carter's funeral. And they had the whole funeral on. I listened to the whole thing. In fact, if the funeral had lasted much longer, I would have joined Jimmy Carter. But I listened to the whole thing. And Stu Eisenstadt was one of the guys who did a eulogy. He was the last one. And he pointed out something that I had not forgotten, but I just hadn't thought about in a long time. Jimmy Carter started deregulation. He deregulated the airlines, trucking, the airwaves. That's why we have 150 channels. He deregulated how alcohol is used. That's why we have distilleries. Anybody that owns a distillery, you need to thank Jimmy Carter. He deregulated all kinds of things. That, of course, was continued under Ronald Reagan. He adopted that mantle and ran with it. And you may not believe this, but I can assure you it's the truth. Airline tickets today are no higher than they were 40 years ago. You may think it costs a lot to fly. 20 years ago, about 50% of people flew. Today, 90%. Airline tickets are cheap. They're not any higher today than they were 40 years ago. So let me mention Reagan. Reagan gave us the greatest free market treaty in history, the GATT treaty, to eliminate tariffs and everything else that restricted trade. He started NAFTA, and you know about NAFTA, the great sucking sound. He started that. He passed that on to Bush, the Bush elder. He passed that on to Clinton, and Clinton actually got it through Congress and signed it. So Reagan and Clinton passed the two most significant free trade agreements in the history of our country. Well, nothing happened for quite a while. Then Trump became president, and he put in place tariffs. Now, the tariffs were put in place for national security reasons. That was the reason given, okay? So he put on tariffs. So then he leaves office, and Biden comes in. Well, what did he do? He kept those tariffs, and he added some more. He put 100% tariff on Chinese electric vehicles, 100%. I don't think any of you are going to be buying a Chinese electric vehicle anytime soon. He also put on export restrictions. In other words, he told U.S. companies, some of them, just a handful, you can't export stuff to China because I don't want you exporting technology to China. And so both presidents put on tariffs, export restrictions. And then that leaves us with, okay, now what's going to happen next Monday? Well, Trump has talked about all kinds of tariffs. I believe it's a lot of hyperbole and bluster. I think we'll see very little in the way of tariffs. His advisors said earlier this week that they perhaps would start with very small tariffs, and then perhaps they would ramp them up later, but at least in the beginning, start out very small. Are tariffs good? In a national security sense, they probably make some sense. In general, I don't think tariffs are a very good way to conduct economic policy. I don't want us to get into a battle with our neighbors over tariffs. And so I hope if we do any at all, it's very small. I really think they're going to be used more for political purposes than economic purposes. I really think Trump thinks that he can get people's attention by putting tariffs on their stuff. So that's just, of course, an opinion. And everybody in here can have a opinion about that. There's been this talk of getting rid of a lot of the illegal immigrants, millions. There's no way that's going to happen. Maybe a few thousand. Just as importantly for me, and I have said this in speeches for 20 years, so I kept asking or hoping that every president would increase H-1 visas. Let's get more people in the United States that actually have a skill. Let's get some people in the country that have been to college. Let's let them come here and get a PhD at MIT and go to work in this country with that incredible degree and that incredible intelligence. Now, we have an H-1B program. Hopefully that will be greatly expanded, and we will allow far more immigrants into our country that have tremendous skills, and hopefully we will see that happen. That's being talked about. Whether or not that in fact occurs, I'm not sure. One other thing about tariffs, there's been analysts they're running around with their hair on fire saying that tariffs will increase inflation. Really? I don't think that's true at all. Tariffs it may tweak the rate of inflation just a little bit. I mean, if you put big ones on, maybe it'd tweak it a little bit. But if you just put on small tariffs, I don't think it would tweak it hardly at all. And the reason I say that is because in the United States, we have this thing called the central bank, the Fed, the Federal Reserve. They determine the rate of inflation in the United States, not tariffs. In 2021, the Fed increased the money supply dramatically. We got tremendous inflation in 22, the second half of 22 and 23. Then they started slowing down the rate of growth in the money supply, and the rate of inflation came back down. They're the 800-pound gorilla in the room when it comes to inflation, not tariffs. So they need to stop talking about that. Are we going to put 25% tariffs on Mexico and Canada? No. Maybe on some on Mexico. Again, it's a political thing to get attention. Is that a good idea? Probably not. I don't think it is particularly, but again, that may be what happens. Interesting thing about China, China has had price deflation for the last 6 quarters, ending in the latest quarter that data is available, which is the third quarter of last year. Their prices have been falling for 6 quarters. China does not want to get into a tariff fight with us. We're far more important to them than they are to us. We don't need them. They need us tremendously to buy all that stuff they make. So if they got in a restrictive battle with us over trade, they would not come out very well. And I'm not suggesting that we do that at all. Again, I hope we don't do that, but that's what would perhaps happen. The value of the dollar has been on a tear. It's been going up tremendously. So if I'm an importer and you put tariffs on stuff that I import, I'm not sure I care. You put a little tariff on there, the value of the dollar goes up 2%, offsets the tariff, the goods don't cost any more than they did yesterday. So the value of the dollar has tremendous amount to do with whether we import stuff or not. But it's been going up, which makes it easier for us to import stuff because it's less expensive, because our dollar is so expensive relative to their currencies, whether we're buying from Mexico or Canada or from China. A few things about real estate. If we're going to talk about the economy, we have to talk about real estate. The National Association of Home Builders, they also have an index of confidence, and it's been below 50 for 2 years in a row, actually over 2 years. They are not confident about building, and that's been true for quite some time. Housing starts in the country are no higher than they were in 2009. We only build about 1.35 million housing units in the United States a year. In the 1980s and 90s, we built 1.7, 1.8, 1.9 million. Now we build considerably fewer, and we have a bigger population. Joe talked about population growth. If we look at the graph of starts, look at the vertical axis. Again, we used to do 1.6, 1.7, 1.8. Now we're doing 1.3, 1.4 million housing starts in the United States. That's pitiful. That's terrible, and that's why the housing market suffers so much. Home prices are up. Guess what? They have to be up. With a shortage of housing, demand greatly exceeds supply, so housing prices have to go up. They're going to go up for as far as the eye can see. So if you're thinking about buying a house and waiting for prices to go down, it's not going to happen in your lifetime. Prices will continue to, unless we have an incredible recession, we'd have to have an incredible recession for that to happen. Existing home sales are way down. We only sell about 4 million houses a year, existing home sales. That used to be 5.5, 5.6, 5.7. Now it's around 4. That's terrible. And I made this point last year. If you don't have a house, you're locked out because the mortgage rate's too high. And if you own a house, you're locked in because you can't get out because the mortgage rate's too high. You have a 3 or 4% mortgage and you're not going to go buy another house and swap your 3 or 4% mortgage for a 7% mortgage. And again, mortgage rates are actually going up, not down at the present time. There's a graph of existing home sales. Look at the vertical axis. You can see we just don't build many houses anymore. And we don't sell very many existing homes because of the mortgage rate being as high as it is. The unemployment rate in the United States is 4.1%. It dropped from 4.2 to 4.1 last Friday for the month of December. We had been adding about over 200,000 jobs a month in 23 and the first half of 24. Then the number got down to about 175,000 a month. And then in December, we added 256,000 jobs. The economy's doing great. And I think the Fed's trying to figure that out. But we're adding lots of jobs, and the labor market is very, very strong. North Carolina, our unemployment rate's 3.7%. That's the November number. Haven't seen the December number, is not out yet. We are lower than the national number. And of course, we know why North Carolina does so well. Joe alluded to parts of that. Tremendous population growth. The state government does a pretty good job with the budget and revenue growth. So there are all kinds of good things about our state. CNBC rated us #1 in business 2 years in a row, and last year we came in second. So we've been first or second for the best state in the union to start a business or have a business, not necessarily start it, but the best business state. So that's good for us. Our problem in the state will be to have a labor force that's got the skills to fill the jobs for all these businesses that are coming to North Carolina. Watauga County, it's hard to talk about Western North Carolina because of the Eileen. But our unemployment rate went from 2.5 to 3.5 in 2 months. That doesn't happen very often. You got to have a really cataclysmic event for that to occur, and we had Helene. So the unemployment rate went up 1% very quickly. If you look at the metrics for the county, and David and I looked at some of these yesterday, we pulled them. Sales tax is pretty much flat, went down a little bit in the fourth quarter of the year after Helene essentially. But some of that was driven by a few big purchases that generated big sales tax. So without them, sales tax would have dropped significantly in the fourth quarter. If you look at occupancy taxes, they actually fell pretty significantly in the fourth quarter of the year. Even though we had quite a few people, EMS and different kinds of people in hotels, the tax itself wasn't paid, and so the taxes actually declined. The real estate numbers were up and down, so we'll need to look at those in the first quarter when we get a little better feel for those numbers. The question, what would have happened to us in the fourth quarter of this year if we hadn't had Helene? David and I talked about this yesterday. This county, this part of the state was ready to really have an incredibly strong fall. The festivals and the tourists that would have been here, had we not had Helene, we probably would have set some records on the metrics for this part of the state had the hurricane not come through. That's how incredibly well planned we were and ready had the hurricane not come. Now, disaster relief, and I'm just going to talk about money. I can't, the emotional side of it, people lost lives, they lost their stuff. I won't talk to that stuff, and the government can't solve those problems, some of those problems. But money will flow in. This is what typically happens in a disaster. Money, of course, you lose all this money, you lose all this economic activity, and then over a period of 5-6 years, money comes in to replace the money that's been lost from the state, from the federal government. The federal government just allocated $100 billion to relief, $100 billion. Now it goes to California, it goes here, it goes to Florida. The point is, when it's all over 5 years from now or 6 years from now, more money will end up coming into the high country than was lost due to the hurricane. The problem is the lag. You got to hang on somehow for 5 years for all that money to actually show up here. So it will happen, and we will be better off in terms of economic horsepower 5 years from now, but people will have lost their jobs, their businesses, and that is the real shame of the whole thing. Let me finish up by talking a little bit about the future. GDP growth this year is going to be around 2.5%, maybe a little higher than that. Again, the economy is doing quite well at this particular time. The rate of inflation has come down to about 3%. It may eke a little bit lower, 2.5% perhaps, but I don't think it's going to make it to 2%, but we will get a little bit decline in the rate of inflation. Mortgage rates, unfortunately, are going to stay closer to 7% than 6%, I believe, for the foreseeable future. The housing market, existing home sales will be about the same. There's no reason for them to change with this mortgage rate. Housing starts remain about the same. They have for the last 2 years. No reason for it to change very much. And housing prices, of course, will continue to eke upward. They have to. We've probably already had the soft landing and didn't notice it. The plane's already taken off again. We came down on the tarmac and hit it, and we're actually flying again, which is why the rate of inflation has sort of gotten stuck. It's not continuing to come down. North Carolina will continue to do better than the nation in terms of the unemployment rate, in terms of job growth, and that sort of thing. We will do better. And Watauga County, we're going to really suffer for another 12, maybe 24 months. But 3 years out, 4 years out, all that money will have accumulated and will have gotten here, and we will be better off economically at that point, but that is some time out into the future. So that is my prepared remarks. Thank you very much. David, I can't remember. Are we doing questions?
Yes, we are.
Okay.
You're not off the hook just yet.
Okay.
So we do have a couple of microphones around the room. If there are time for any questions for Harry or Joe, we'd entertain that. These gentlemen will also be standing around here for a few minutes afterward as well, if you'd like to take that on a more personal nature. But any questions for Dr. Davis or Joe here this afternoon? Anyone? Anyone? All right. Well, with that then, we've got one in the back. We've got one in the back. One of your colleagues, as a matter of fact. Yes. Dr. Clark.
Dr. Clark.
Yes, sir.
Dr. Davis, how about them dogs? A question. Just a prediction on the stock market. We've had an amazing 2 years. You know, my daughter works for UBS. She won't tell me anything. So my question to you is, do you have a prediction on the stock market?
Well, I've never been a stock picker in terms of trying to predict where the market's going. I've tried to stay out of that game. But you know, it doesn't matter what I think. It doesn't matter what you think. It doesn't matter what anybody thinks. Where's the market going to be 5 years from now? Higher than it is today. That's all I know. But isn't that all I need to know? Isn't that all I need to know? I mean, I listened to this guy on Bloomberg, and he talks about the fact that when he graduated from college, he put all of his money in the stock market in his 401k. He didn't put it in bonds and money market funds. He put it in the stock market, which is what I did. And he can't believe how rich he is. The market does this. But it just keeps going up. So I don't know where it's going to be a year from now, but 5 years from now, it's going to be a lot higher than it is today. And so if you're in, you'll do very well.
You heard it here. Any last questions for Dr. Davis or for Joe? All right. Thank you very much, sir. We're going to take the opportunity to bid you farewell. We are going to put a graphic up on the screen that I'd encourage you to look at as we make our way out of here today, and that is a link to our economic indicators report that I believe Brad mentioned Harry's got a part in. That report, fresh out today, has got third and fourth quarter data in there, as well as the results of our recent business snapshot poll that we collected data in for the month of December. I cannot express enough to you how important that business snapshot email is when we send it. We are collecting data points to share with policymakers, with our elected officials, and with many folks that are looking for drill down data at the surface level from our communities. So when we send that out, the more responses we get to it, the more answers we can provide Raleigh and Washington and on up the stream from there. So thank you again for your attendance today. Congratulations to our winners. We would like to get some photos with you before you head out of here today. Thank you for your attention and all of the time you spend making this community so great. We look forward to seeing you again soon. Thank you.